Thank you, Charlie. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to look out and see so many friendly faces, so many people I've known. A lot of you folks I've known for 25, 30 years, and gosh, we've all gotten old together. When Charlie asked me to talk, he said, well, since you're retiring, you can pick the song for today. So I told him that I'd like all of us to sing Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, but evidently the choir kind of overrode my choice there. What I'd like to do today is I'm just going to reflect on some of this is kind of my Bill Lamb version of my point of view. I'm going to reflect on what I think are some of the major developments in the greater Louisville area in the 30 years that Business First has been in existence. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities I think that facing our community going forward. But before I do that, I want to kind of take a trip back to the summer of '84. And a lot of you lived through this, and this will be an education for some of the younger folks. So, Business First started on August 13th, 1984. So at the time that Business First began, the four largest banks in Kentucky, First National Bank of Louisville, Citizens Fidelity Bank and Trust, Liberty National Bank and Trust, and the Bank of Louisville, were all owned and headquartered here in Louisville. UPS at that time employed just 1,200 workers at its Louisville hub, and GE at that time had 13,500 employees out of Appliance Park. You'll remember Harvey Sloan was our mayor, Mitch McConnell was our county judge, Martha Lane Collins was our governor, and Ronald Reagan was our president. When we began in '84, Jerry Abramson was a year away from beginning an unprecedented 18 years as the city's mayor. In 1984, community giants like Tom Simons and Wendell Cherry and Mary Helen Bick and Wilson Wyatt Jr. and Barry Bingham Sr. and Henry Heiser Sr., they were still among us, still making tremendous contributions to our community at the time. At that time, Kentucky's first heart transplant was 2 weeks away. Tom Meeker had just been hired to revitalize the slumping Churchill Downs, and Howard Schnellenberger was soon to be named head football coach and savior at the U of L football program. In '84, Ford was producing LTDs at its Fern Valley Road plant and large commercial trucks at its Chamberlain Road facility. Again in '84, cell phones, internet, digital cameras, email, and social media were in the future for all of us. Downtown at that time was without the LG&E Tower, the Aegon Tower, the Toonerville Trolley, the Amana Building, 4th Street Live, and the KFC Yum Center. The Ohio River was an ugly junkyard. Shoppers in town flocked to Stewart's, Levy's, Snyder's, Bick's, and Allied Sporting Goods. St. Anthony Hospital, Methodist Evangelical Hospital, and Baptist Hospital Highlands were still open at that time. You could dine at Casa Grisani, Hasenauer's, or Flaherty's, but you couldn't eat yet at Vincenzo's, Ruth Chris Steakhouse, or Berenice. Don Swain was the president of the University of Louisville. Donald Ingerson was the superintendent of the Jefferson County Public Schools. The late Eugene Petrick was the head man at what was then Bellarmine College, and the late Sister Eileen Egan was the president of Spalding University. As you remember, the Binghams owned the Courier-Journal, WHAS-TV, WHAS-AM, WAMZ-FM, and the late afternoon daily, the Louisville Times. Local economic development efforts at those times were shared by the Louisville Area Chamber of Commerce, the Louisville Jefferson County Office for Economic Development, and the now defunct Greater Louisville Economic Development Partnership, which many of you remember wasn't even formed until 1987. In 1984, you couldn't shop at Walmart, you couldn't gamble at Horseshoe Southern Indiana, ride a roller coaster at Kentucky Kingdom, go see a movie at Tinseltown, order a pizza from Papa John's, or get off of I-64 at the Blankenbaker Road. And when business first began in the summer of 1984, I had a lot more hair and a lot less stomach. So that kind of sets the stage for my talk today. And again, I don't have a prepared speech here. I'm just going to hit on what I think are some of the major developments that have impacted Greater Louisville. Some of these are good, some of these are not so good. They're not in any particular order of importance or anything. But I will start off with the merger of Louisville and Jefferson County government in 2003. As so many of you know, that was an effort that was years and years in coming. It was something we finally pulled off. And it was such a winner for so many reasons. First, it proved we could dream big and have big vision and actually do something and actually lead the country. There was a few big mergers beforehand, but we became a model for how to merge and consolidate local government. Those of you who will remember beforehand, when we had a Jefferson County government, we had the old City of Louisville government, it was so inefficient, they didn't communicate. Literally, the police force for both the city and county had radio systems that weren't compatible. So if a city cop chased a criminal to the county line, they had to basically call in and have them call the county on the phone to say, hey, this guy's coming into your territory. If a business was looking to come into Louisville or our general area and was looking at a site maybe in the old city of Louisville borders and one in Jefferson County, they'd have to talk to two different sets of people: planning, zoning, economic development folks. So that was a huge leap forward for our community. Another major accomplishment happening was UPS opening a small hub here in 1981. That was the beginning, which has now become this economic juggernaut out at the airport. There's more than, UPS currently has more than 20,000 employees in Louisville, largest employer in Louisville, largest employer in the state of Kentucky. It's been attributed that at least 150 companies have located in Louisville or around Louisville specifically because of the presence of the UPS Air Hub. Louisville has become a national logistics center, logistics and distribution center, all attributing to the fact that we have that proximity to the UPS hub. Now, that UPS started here in '81, but they wouldn't have stayed here, they wouldn't have expanded here unless city officials and working with county officials and state officials at the time moved to expand our airport and add a parallel runway. As all of us that lived through that know, that was a very painful experience. Several hundred homes had to be relocated, and it was a very difficult process when you have a kind of a landlocked existing airport to recreate it on its same footprint. But it's something that in retrospect obviously needed to be done, and we would not have UPS and those 20,000 jobs and those 150 related companies here if we wouldn't have been bold enough to expand the airport. One of, I think, the major developments since we started in '84, which is on the not so good side, is the loss of corporate headquarters here in town. You know, again, you've heard us talking about the banks. When business first started in '84, all the banks, the top 5 banks in town, were locally owned. The Courier Journal was locally owned. Brown Williamson was here. Capital Holding was here. So we've had some of these companies move out, and others have been purchased and now are run from out of town. A lot of these companies are still very involved in our community and very philanthropic, but the bottom line is when the CEO and the top corporate people live in a city, they're much more likely to be engaged and they're much more generous in the city they're headquartered in. So that's one thing it's really hurt Louisville is we don't have a lot of major companies anyways, and really in that 80 to 95 time span, we lost a lot of local ownership. Another major plus, it took 40 years to finally get there, is of course the Ohio River Bridges project. I think that's a good news, bad news thing. It's good news that we finally are going to do it. It's finally going to get done. It's going to have a huge impact on our community, not only improving our traffic patterns, but it's going to have a huge impact from an economic development standpoint on both sides of the river. And we do have to think of ourselves as a regional greater Louisville. We've seen what's happened out in River Ridge already with Amazon, and it seems like every week there's a new company that's locating out there, and that's just going to be accelerate once this Bridges project is done. It's also going to help our existing companies. I know UPS, Ford, GE, anybody that was having supplies coming in or moving product out, we're getting increasingly concerned about the traffic congestion, and you got drivers sitting on the road, and time is money. We really saw an example of that when the Sherman Minton was down there with its problems. So the Bridges project is something that had to be done. The only downside from my vantage point on that is if that East End Bridge should have been done in about 1985. It was part of the Snyder plan. And then we should have built a second downtown bridge, probably, early to mid-90s. If we would have done those, it would have been done and reconfigured Spread Again Junction, and it would have been paid for by federal dollars, because that's the way those kind of projects were paid in those days. Now we are going to get it done, but they're obviously going to have to be told, because these kind of projects are no longer being funded by the federal government. Another, I think, important development in the last 30 years has been the emergence of the University of Louisville. If you think back, to even further back in the 30 years when U of L was a small private college, and then it became incorporated into the state system, and still it was kind of known as this commuter college. But what has happened out there is just tremendous. Much better, higher quality student, more research money. The campus now, there's, I think, 5,000 plus housing units on the campus. And U of L has also become an important real estate developers, as we've seen, between the Nucleus building and the projects they've done out on their Shelby campus. And so they have really become an economic engine here. If you look at any major successful metro area in the United States, they have a very high quality institution of higher learning centered in that town. We traditionally haven't had that. U of L is quickly becoming that, and that's really important for Louisville's future. Another important development, I think, as you look back over the years, is just the presence of GE and Ford. Talked about them earlier. They've really had roller coaster histories here. There was several times in the last 30 years where it looked like there was a good chance that one or both of them would actually leave town. But because of a variety of things, good leadership on their part, luck on our part, and some investment by city and state in investments. Ford now has invested a fortune in the Fern Valley road plant and completely modernized that. When it was opened a year ago, it was the most modern automobile assembly plant in the world. And so they've got they've been here over 100 years, and now they've recommitted to Louisville, which is a very strong thing. Same thing with GE. We've seen GE, being this huge employer, and then dwindle to the point where so many of the appliances were made overseas. Just 6-7 years ago, GE was talking about spinning off that division and trying to sell it. Fortunately for Louisville, the recession hit, and they couldn't do that. Then, then with some incentives and some concessions from the union, they've recommitted to Louisville, and now they're going great guns out there. And so from a manufacturing standpoint, manufacturing across the United States obviously has declined, but Louisville has its manufacturing employment has declined in Louisville, but not to the extent that it has in a lot of the Rust Belt cities. And it's got a lot to do with the fact that Ford and GE are still here and very vibrant and have attracted a lot of suppliers. I think another really important development over the years has been the whole growth of Humana. When you think about this amazing company that was started by two attorneys from the West End, Wendell Cherry and David Jones, and they started a nursing home company, and then it morphed into a hospital company, and then it became this insurance giant. But even with Humana, if you remember back in the late 90s, United Healthcare had an agreement to buy Humana, and Humana was going to keep, quote unquote, a significant corporate presence here, but headquarters was going to move to Minneapolis. Again, stroke of luck. Fortunately, that deal fell through because of some of the problems United Healthcare was having at the time. Humana stayed here, still headquartered here. Now there's more than 11,000. They have more than 11,000 local employees. They are obviously a huge supporter of several efforts in arts and other efforts in our community, and they are the biggest of the 3 Fortune 500 companies we have in Louisville. Another really interesting and important development, I think, has been the emergence of the restaurant companies in Louisville. Louisville has become the fast food headquarters in the world, between Yum and Papa John's and Texas Roadhouse and numerous other companies. And I know a lot of us, when we think about fast food, we think about teenagers flipping burgers or making pizzas. But those companies, obviously, with their corporate headquarters here, have very well compensated executives and IT people people doing really creative stuff in our town, and that's a niche that no other town really can duplicate. And kind of a sidebar to that is the emergence of Louisville, too, as a foodie town, which is really interesting when you think of it. We're the fast food capital in the world, but on the other hand, too, we've got the best local restaurants of any city our size in the country. That's been something that's kind of organically grown here. A lot of those chefs spun off from Casa Grisani originally, and we've got a tremendous local food scene which is, you know, continues to flourish here. And now with the emergence of bourbon, you know, bourbon is sexy, bourbon is in, and other distilled spirits, we've got a great opportunity in Louisville here to promote the so-called Urban Bourbon Trail, and we're bringing a lot of people not only from across the United States, but from all over the world who are bourbon fanatics. We've got an opportunity now to bring them to town and expose them to everything else we got to go. And another strong point that we've developed in this town is, in a lot of that probably springs off from Humana's existence, is we've become a senior care, an aging care headquarters. We have several, Kindred and Signature and Elder Care and Trilogy and Atria. You can go on and on about the number of aging care companies that are based here, and now they're working together on best practices. And when you talk about an industry that's really poised for the future, with I'm looking out at all of us baby boomers who are going to need those kind of services in the not too distant future, that's a real strong seller for Louisville, real strong economic impact, a lot of jobs in those companies, and that's been a really big positive. So that's just some of what I would consider some of the major developments that's happened in the last 30 years. And now I'd just like to touch a little bit on, again, from my point of view, what are some of the challenges still facing our community as we move forward. And right now, I think one of the biggest problems we still have in Louisville is pace. I think we're at the point now we got the right vision, but we still tend to stroll into the future while our competitor cities are sprinting into the future. It just takes too long to get things done here, and that's something we continually got to work on. A lot of those accomplishments I was talking about, whether it be merged government or bridges, you know, it took decades longer than it should to get done. We need to, you know, be able to bring closure to some of these things quicker and then move on, looking at the future. I think, you know, Kentucky, the state is awful afflicted with that disease. I mean, we see things like, you know, we're the last one at the plate when it comes to gambling now, expanded gambling, and well, now I know Mayor Fisher was here talking about the local option sales tax. You know, 37 other states have that. Kentucky's still trying to get that through. So that's a challenge, is we are progressing nicely in Louisville, but the bad news is our competitor cities are progressing nicely too, but at a much faster pace. And we're starting out behind in some cases, and we really need to catch up. You know, the number one thing we got to do here, we all know, we have been concentrating on this for a long time, is improving educational attainment in our community. We are a relatively undereducated metro compared to the cities we compete against. In this information age we live in, knowledge is power. We need, you know the story. We need more people with 4-year degrees and 2 years degrees in technical training, because those are the kind of jobs of the future, the well-paying jobs of the future, not the old brawn jobs. The only thing that worries me about this, I think it's got the attention of government and school systems, obviously, and business leaders, but in Louisville, we tend to have short attention spans. This is something that's not going to get improved and fixed overnight. You know, I think all of us as business leaders, we have to get involved. We got to get in classrooms. We got to understand the issues. We got to support the school systems. And we got to stick with it, because it's going to be long term. You don't, turn around test scores overnight. You don't, have a whole generation. You don't improve your graduation rates exponentially overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take commitments for all of us to keep that as our top priority. One of the things that I think has always afflicted Louisville, and I can say this because I live in Indiana, is that unfortunately, again, my point of view, unfortunately Louisville happens to be located in the state of Kentucky. Louisville is trying to be a modern, progressive, innovative urban center in what is still seen as a backward rural state. We've had these battles with Frankfurt for all these years. Cynthia and I were talking about that this morning, about how little we get back from Frankfurt and how badly we're treated by Frankfurt. Well, I think it's time to, get rid of that moaning and start trying to do something about it. We're at the point now where Kentucky has actually changed. The majority of people are living in urban areas. I think if the Louisville delegation would ever get together with Lexington and Northern Kentucky and Owensboro and Bowling Green and go to Frankfurt with more of an urban agenda and saying, hey, we're the areas where people want to live now. We're the places that are creating the jobs, so we need more resources and support out of Frankfurt. I think it could be done, but again, we tend to sit around and moan about how Frankfurt treats us rather than going about and trying to do something about it. I think we've made great leaps and bounds, but I still think we need to be a more business and entrepreneurial friendly community. This is still not the easiest place to start a business or to grow a business. We got, we're over-regulated. We got too much red tape. We got too much hoops to jump through. And in this day and age, when companies can go anywhere and locate anywhere, we've got to make sure that they don't look at Louisville as a place to skip because it's just too hard to get things done here. I mentioned the local option sales tax initiative that Mayor Fisher is pushing. He's relentless on it, but I think he's completely right on. If you look at across the country and you look at state governments, they don't have any money anymore. It's all going to pensions. It's all going to Medicare and other obligations of that. They don't have the funds to invest in capital projects throughout the state like they used to, and we need a revenue source to get things done. I think the local option sales tax makes a lot of sense. You know all about it. I mean, it would give the people the chance to vote on specific projects, whether they've seen it get done or not. We got to look at, America's changing. The young people that are coming up now, they're putting a lot more emphasis on where they're working and the sense of place where they're going, and they're expecting communities with great arts and parks and amenities and entertainment and sports options, and you got to keep up because there's a lot of our competitor cities are really doing some cool stuff, and unfortunately a lot of that stuff's been done with proceeds from local option sales taxes these last 5-10 years. I was on that glide trip to Oklahoma City a couple of years ago, and a lot of you were on that trip. And think about it, 30 years ago, I mean, did anybody ever think of Louisville and Oklahoma City simultaneously? I don't think so. Well, they've completely revamped that city. They are a professional sports town now. They've rebuilt downtown. They've added all these amenities, and they've done it from funds that people voted to raise their own taxes for those purposes. So I think that's something that needs to be done here, and hope it gets done. One thing we need to concentrate on too is we need to become a much healthier city and state. You've seen all the numbers when it comes to whether it be lung cancer rates or heart disease or obesity. We're always somewhere between 45 and 50. The toll that takes on resources is just incredible. I think we're starting to realize that. We're putting a lot more emphasis on living healthier lifestyles and eating healthier diets. But that's something that we really need to improve. Like I said earlier, we're still a relatively undereducated, a relatively unhealthy, and a relatively old community. And those three aren't good when you're out there, competing in this economy for jobs and trying to attract companies to town. So those are kind of, my thoughts on that. I think a few of the opportunities that are out there, we must continue to, exploit our location, our geographic location, and the access we have to the river and UPS and interstate highways. I like the emphasis that Mayor Gray and Mayor Fisher is putting on the BEAM project, the Advanced Manufacturing Initiative. I think that holds great hope for, setting a region that will attract that kind of new age manufacturer who, are going to pay a lot better and be a lot cleaner in producing their products. As I said earlier, we got to continue to exploit the popularity of bourbon and other spirits, and build on that aging care factor that we talked about earlier.